Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday morning between paper 1 and paper 2. Paper 1 was somewhat of a surprising paper with the focus there was on differentiation in there. My main advice as regards to paper 1 at this point is to forget all about it and let's move on to paper 2. However, we will learn a little bit from paper 1, what came up, and just bear that in mind for paper 2 in terms of what we think is more likely to come up, or even the style of questions. Okay, I'm going to speak about exam strategy for paper 2 first this time around. The reason is because you might well think it's going to be the exact same strategy that I said for paper 1, but it's actually slightly different for paper 2, and it depends on the following. It depends on whether you're planning on focusing more so on stats and probability, or more so on, we say, geometry and trigonometry. Now, in paper 1 is your algebra, what's called number, that's your sequence, series, financial maths, induction, and your function strand, which is your functions, differentiation, integration. Now, to a certain extent, they're all linked in together strongly through the use of algebra. In paper 2, it's very different. Stats and probability are a very, very different section from trig and geometry. There's hardly any overlap between the two. Stats and probability is one part, trig and geometry the other, and coordinate geometry is in there with the trig and geometry part, obviously. So some people favor one over the other. Some people tell me they haven't done a whole pile of stats and probability, or they mightn't have done geometry at all, or they might have no constructions and no theorems done. And that, of course, is going to influence your decisions on what to do. My main advice as regards that at this point in time on a Saturday morning is I wouldn't go learning off new stuff now. You know, if you've no theorems done, look, you're just going to have to see, hope they mightn't come up. And if they don't come up, obviously it doesn't affect you. If it does come up, you're not going to do it anyway. Even if you learn them today, the chances are you're going to do a different question on Monday because you won't be confident about them. Okay, here's the thing to note. Stats and probability questions often take less time to complete compared to the trig and the geometry questions, particularly probability, because the answer is often, you might be saying, what is the probability that such an event takes place? And oftentimes the answer, you're just writing down an answer, which might be 2/3. So naturally that takes far less time than working out a cosine rule question, where there's a number of steps. So that's just the nature of it. However, it has an impact now because of the fact of the choice. So if you love stats and probability, you might end up doing, there might be a short question, long question on both stats and probability. So there might be 4 questions there on stats and probability, and you might do them all first. You do 2 other short questions at least at that point, but the chances are you'll have extra time at that stage. And I would suggest it is a good idea, if you've done all the stats and probability questions that are there, to perhaps do at least another short question, because with probability there is the possibility that you can misinterpret a question more so than in other topics. That's just the nature of it. Again, I'll go through my general advice here, and I'll return to that thought about stats and probability in a moment. But when the exam starts, this is the number one kind of exam strategy, I say. My feeling is, don't look through the whole paper. It's too overwhelming. There's too much information. What you do is just try and find a couple of short questions, maybe even just one that you say, I know how to do everything in there. I'm going to do that. And you do that question. For a lot of people, it was question 2 in paper 1. You do that. Maybe do a second one, and then take a breath. You're into the exam. You probably spend 25 minutes at that stage inside there. You're kind of settled into it. A bit of the nerves have gone. And then you have more time to have a look around at the rest of the paper. Okay, so do that first. Again, I'll just repeat this. Some students just start at question 1 and go 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a habit because of the fact in your junior cert and in even 5th year exams, etc., you wouldn't have had the choice. So you just often start at the start and work through it. I think in paper 1 this year, you would have found it was good advice to not just start at the start and work through, just pick a couple of good short questions and do those. Now, at this point, I'd read the remaining short questions, complete a total of 4 at this point, leaving out the 2 that you feel least confident about. Now, you may have instead gone on and done a couple of long questions at this stage. No problem. Absolutely no problem. It's not definitive. It's just really about finding the questions that you want. Okay. What I would suggest is if you have your 4 short questions done, have a look through the long questions. And again, spend time doing this. A lot of people felt the question 8 and 9 were the easiest questions in the long questions yesterday on paper 1. It depends on what topics you had best prepared, But again, it's definitely a case of having a look at all 4 and picking out the 2 that you're most confident with. It is likely at that time that you will have some extra time. Not for everybody. It didn't happen for everybody. Some people just barely got the requirement completed. That's absolutely fine. Again, don't leave early. I mentioned this last day. I said, people will leave the exam after half an hour, and throughout the country, people did, and they walked out and they said, right, I'm taking my accredited grade. And that's fine. Absolutely fine. But for you, that's not to do what you want to do. Ignore the people walking out. Focus on what you're doing. Stay there for the full length of the time. Okay. So if your 2 long questions have gone well, I would be inclined to leave it at that, with the one exception that if you've done a full probability long question and you've loads of time remaining, say you've got an hour remaining, you've everything done, okay, then it's fine to do an extra long question at that point. But in general, I feel that you'd be better served practicing, redoing some of the long questions you have done, any parts you're unsure of, verifying everything. I think that's more likely to yield you more marks. Because there's 4 short questions done, and if you're looking through the last 2 and you say, actually, I do know how to do this one, maybe you look back at a question, maybe it's a geometry one and you aren't too confident in geometry, but you look at it and say, hold on a second, that's similar triangles, I do know how to do that, maybe give that a go. But again, I don't see any point particularly in doing 6 short questions. Personally, I don't think there's a major benefit. I think it's better to go back and spend your time double checking. So go through the questions. This is it. I'm going to highlight this again. Check to see that you've answered the question was asked and that you got the correct units, etc. And I'm going to even take out the etc. and put in rounding here, As I always say to my students, you don't want to end up on high partial credit when you've done all the hard work. Make sure you get the full credit. If you have the questions done, try not to leave anything blank, or in the questions you've done. And if you don't know what to do what you know. Just try and do something. If it's a question talking about a Bernoulli trial or something like that, if you recognize it as a Bernoulli trial, but you're not quite sure what exactly it means, if it's one of those ones that says, find the probability that the second success occurred after the 10th trial. So you might say, trial. Okay, maybe it's a Bernoulli trial question, but you're not quite sure of the logic. That's okay. Do your Bernoulli trial anyway. Do something. Because you've the correct formula written down. You've inputted the numbers into it. You're getting some marks for that. And remember, you don't have to get everything right. You just want to get it started. If you're looking for a H6, you mightn't be getting that many questions fully right. That's okay. You just keep going. Make sure you get everything started. Okay, here we go. The predictions for paper 2. The orange highlighter is the strong tip. I'll talk about the green highlighter there in a moment. I said to my students all this year that the number 1 prediction for the paper, right, the overall biggest thing I would be concentrating on, and I told every student, no student could leave this out, was trigonometry. I felt that there was a possibility that the periodic functions would come up in paper 1. I mentioned that in the last video, and sure enough, they did. In fact, they came up twice. So I do think it is less likely periodic functions will come up in paper 2. However, you can't rule anything out. However, the number 1 banker that I've said to everyone from the start, and I hope it comes true, is this, then I think there would be a long question with a 3D diagram in trigonometry. You know, it could work in some area and volume in there as well, but it'd be 3D trig. Okay, that's my number one tip. Make sure you practice that. Make sure that you know whenever any horizontal line meets a vertical line, a right angle is formed. That's so obvious, except when you see it in a question, because the angle doesn't look like 90, because you're trying to draw a 3D diagram on a 2D page. So people sometimes get caught with that. I do think there's some trig identity is now likely after there was not a whole pile of formal proof stuff on paper 1. So I think it could be the cosine rule, which is typically number 3, as is written, or as the cos of A minus B. Okay, the cos of A minus B is a tricky one. You know, again, if you're going for a H6, it mightn't be something that you're that interested in learning. And if it comes up, you say, okay, maybe let's look at this other question. Okay, statistics. Okay, this is the other part that I think will dominate paper 2, stats, so trigonometry and stats. Definite long question involving confidence interval hypothesis testing. Okay, if you're going for top grades, H1, H2, revised p-value, if you're hoping to get a H6, I'd take a chance and leave it out, because it's, you know, a lot of students find it difficult anyway. I'm going to say this about p-value. If it comes up and you haven't done it, you can still get an awful lot of the marks. Because really what you're doing is a hypothesis test, and you can do it using the test for significance. You get the Z score, and you can complete your hypothesis. Fail to reject or reject the null hypothesis. You know, you can come up with your conclusion, and you can end up with the correct conclusion using that, never using the p-value. Now, you're not going to get full marks because you haven't used the p-value, but you could get a lot of marks because you've got the correct conclusion. Okay, you can watch the video there on the p-value. You'll know more what I'm talking about. Okay, I think there's a good chance it could be a scatter plot, correlation coefficient, line best fit is a short question. Also, if you're going to do statistics, if you're hell-bent on doing it, make absolutely sure you can find the standard deviation on the calculator. Okay, make sure you can do that. You're not going to figure that out in the exam. Normal distribution, that's your bell curve. Your empirical rule, you know, 95% of all values within 2 standard deviations of the mean, and Z scores are likely to come up. The line and the circle, I think, has now got a higher possibility of coming up worth more, given the fact that trigonometry came up a couple of times in paper 1. So the area of the triangle, perpendicular distance between lines, you know, fair enough, nothing too exciting there. 1 second now. A circle question mixed with constructions that came up in 2016 and 17. What I'm talking about there is the orthocenter, the centroid, the circumcenter, things like that. Now, this is a tip for this one. It's quite a strong tip. A long question on the line and circle is a definite possibility. And I'm going to even say one thing here. I'm going to say, again, possibly mixed with geometry. So my maths was always a bit better than my spelling. Do I spell that correctly? I hope I have. Okay. So again, I could see a situation where you'd be finding the circumcenter. Now, some people, I'm on to geometry now, but some people have no constructions done, you know, they didn't get to them in school, and, you know, we understand what happened over the last couple of years. It was hard to get everything done. Even if that's the case, I would still try and know what the words mean. Okay, just what they mean. So that if it comes up in a coordinate geometry question, you're not looking at the word circumcenter and you've never heard it before, or you don't know what it means. Just have a little read through it. Even if you can't do the construction, know what it means. I think a theorem proof is likely. My tip is theorem 13. A lot of people think it's going to be theorem 11. Okay, so we'll see. You know, who knows? Maybe it could be theorem 12. There's only 3 of them. I think we had 10 of them in 1999 to do. I think in 1994 they had 21 to learn off. So something like that. I might be wrong there, but there was a lot anyway. Similar and congruent triangles are likely to appear somewhere, I think. You know, they could be just built in a little part of a question. Oh yeah, sorry, this part is the geometry terminology and basics will be scattered through the paper. I think this year that there's room to involve a lot of trigonometry, geometry terminology, and your basic knowledge of it just built into questions. Watch out for that. Don't rule out geometry completely. Just have a look back through the basics of it, even just your basic vocabulary of it. You don't have to know off every definition if you don't want. Just know what the words mean. Okay. Enlargements could come up. They've never come up. They could come up. If you've never done it before, it's possibly you're not likely to learn them off now, but they are actually pretty easy. So if you've done them, make sure you just have another look back. The probability, again, there's a good chance it could come up as both a short and a long question. Therefore, all the probability should be known really well if you're going to attempt it. I'm going to give one little thing here that may not come up, and that's the Venn diagram questions with the conditional probability. Now, conditional probability itself might come up in what you call the common sense probability questions. That could happen, but not in the Venn diagrams. We'll see. Don't forget about permutations, their arrangements. I do think they could appear. Okay, so they could appear on the paper. It's funny how you notice the typos when you're doing the live recording. Bernoulli trials could come up. As a question, it's not a bad one. Just make sure you've revised it. Make sure you revise what are the conditions required for Bernoulli trials. Tree diagrams, make sure you know those. And z-scores, again, they can come up in stats or probability. Make sure you know both. And remember with probability, first you work out the logic, then work out the maths. Don't rush into the probability question. Have a think about it first. And then do the question. Okay, on that note, guys, I'm going to wish everybody the very best of luck in paper 2. I'm going to go back to this idea. Remember, if you don't know what to do what you know. Just hang on in there in the exam. Keep battling away. And sometimes it's just at the end of the exam, the last little bit of time, some things click with you and you say, oh yeah, I remember now how to do that. And it happens. That can't happen if you're standing outside the door all done and then you realize, oh God, it was a Bernoulli trial, Okay, on that note, I say good luck to you all. And hopefully paper 2, you'll be smiling after it.